Okay, in our last lecture, we talked about that the way that psychical and social relations come together to form our senses of self. And we also talked about the role of language in all of that. Language is kind of an interesting one because language is like your skin in the sense that your skin is what serves as a barrier but also a connector between what's inside you, physically speaking, and what's outside you, physically speaking. Language does the same thing. Language is addressed to other people. It's something that is verbalized when you speak, addressed to others, but it is usually connected to something within. Usually it shows us trying to express something, to press something out, to express something interior, a thought, a feeling, or the like. So language serves as this go-between between interior and exterior as well, between psychic and social. The language in particular that's relevant for Lacan, building on Freud, we called free association. And free association is when the patient in an analytic experience would sit down and obey two laws. The first is the law of non-omission, which means you say everything and anything. Don't leave anything out, say as much as you want. And the second law is non-systematization. You wouldn't feel obliged to keep things coherent or even to speak in sentences. You would allow your speech to function as weirdly and wonkily and as much like a weird dream sequence as you would like. You say anything and everything however you want. That would be the law of free association. So the type of language that is uniquely relevant to psychoanalytic experience is a free-flowing, everyday, mundane, sometimes scattered, weird, dreamlike, free associative way of speaking. Let's learn a little bit more about how this way of speaking operates. If we're on page 66, you look down in the second paragraph under the next section, language pops again. And then in the final paragraph on page 66, beginning with "but the psychoanalyst," we see language at center stage. Let's see what more we can learn about this. But the psychoanalyst, in order not to detach analytic experience from the language of the situation that it implies, the situation of the interlocutor, comes upon the simple fact that language, prior to signifying something, signifies to someone. It is simply because the analyst is there, listening, that the man who speaks addresses him. And since he forces his discourse not to want to say anything, he becomes what this man wants to tell him. What the man says may in fact have no meaning, but what he says to the analyst conceals one anyway. Now this is important here. Before language means anything, when you speak it, it forms a relationship to somebody. There is an element of addressivity here that is occurring regardless of what you say. And there are many ways of speaking where what is communicated is not any particular thought or feeling content, but simply the existence of a relationship. So for instance, you're walking down the hallway, someone's coming at you, and you say, "How are you doing?" And they respond, "Nothing much. What's up with you?" And you say, "I'm fine, thank you." Each of us have had weird interactions like this, where if you look at them on paper, they seem strange. But in actual practice, it's very easy and almost unnoticeable when someone says, "What's up?" And you're like, "Fine, thank you." Because what matters in that interaction is not what you're transmitting, not your actual feeling state. What matters there is the check-in. It's somebody just checking in to see how you're doing, to see how your relationship to them is doing. It's them saying, "Hey, I'm not going to murder you in this hallway. I'm not a bad guy. We're on the same team. Here, I see you and you see me, and we're in a relationship." This is what Lacan means here. Prior to signifying something, whether you're having a good day or a bad day, whether you've been doing a lot or not very much, prior to signifying anything about you or your day, you are signifying to someone. And the way that you're signifying to someone in the example we just mentioned is by greeting them. Not by directing a hostile gesture towards them, but by simply greeting them as if to say hello. So what you're communicating here to someone, before anything about how you're doing and all this stuff, is that you have a positive, friendly relationship to them that you hope is reciprocated. And let me tell you how the truth of this example plays out. If you walk down the hallway and you ask somebody, hey, how you doing? And they respond and say, you know what? I've been having a really bad day. Do you have 30 minutes to speak with me about this? I've got some serious issues. Actually, it's been a terrible day. Thank you for asking. I'm having a really terrible time. That's not an appropriate answer. In that context, that person looks weird because the purpose of that interaction is not to actually convey how you feel to another person. It's just a check-in to mark the friendly relationship that you have to them. As soon as you actually start to transmit your conduct and explain to somebody what it is you're feeling or what it is you've been up to in detail, the whole interaction goes off the rails because it's not, the purpose of that interaction is not to transmit information. It's to ritualistically reinforce a relationship, a friendship, a cordiality. There is no information that needs to be transmitted. And it's proven by the fact that whenever somebody does try and transmit information, the interaction gets weird. So you walk down the hallway, you see somebody, and you say, hey, what's up? The appropriate answer, you know it, is nothing much. What's up with you? But that's never true. There's always all kinds of things that are up. You could just as easily respond to that question and say, what's up? I'll tell you what's up. Are you paying attention to what's happening on the eastern borders of Ukraine? And you start going into the details about it. That could be something that's up. That's definitely up. It's been up for a long time. It's going to be up for a long time. You could certainly regale this person walking down the hallway with that part of what's up. You could talk about your day. You could talk about what's happening in your family. You could talk about what's happening in a book that you're reading. I'll tell you what's up. I watched 8 episodes of a really great show on Netflix last night. I'd like to talk with you about that. What's up? Well, let me ask you this. Do you have 30 minutes to talk about our Lord Jesus Christ? You see what I'm saying? When you ask somebody what's up, you're not actually asking them to tell you what is up with them, what they're up to. You want them to just say nothing much. Because that means we're cool. You're cool, we're cool, I'm cool, you keep your stuff, I keep my stuff, thank you, goodbye. Good relationship. I'm emphasizing this because it's the relational, intersubjective aspect of speech. Prior to speaking anything of substance to somebody, it's the very fact that we are exchanging words in a language that we both presume to understand, and the relationship, the connection that is made there, that comes first. Prior to telling anybody anything about yourself, when you speak to them, there's a moment of address. I am singling you out to address you. And in that address, depending on how the address goes, is a relationship. There's a relationality that precedes the transmission of any information. And Lacan is saying that is absolutely fundamental to what happens in psychoanalysis. It is simply because the analyst is there listening that the man who speaks addresses him. And since he forces his discourse not to want to say anything, he becomes what this man wants to tell him. What the man says may in fact have no meaning, as in the case of the example where someone says, "What's up?" and you say, "I'm doing all right, thanks." Has no meaning, but what he says to the analyst conceals one anyway. In this case, the concealed meaning would be the friendly relationship that "what's up, I'm fine, thank you" conveys, beyond any meaningless aspect of the interaction. It is in the impulse to respond that the listener senses this, and it is by suspending this impulse to respond that the analyst understands the meaning of the discourse. So here the technical thing Lacan is getting at is that A good psychoanalyst is somebody who acknowledges that it's appropriate to respond to somebody's address and yet resists that impulse, does not respond, and in so doing understands the meaning of the discourse. It's at the level of call and response, and the relational dynamic, the relationship, the intersubjective relationship that is established when you address speech to another person, that we see all of the great foundational movements of communication coming into play. Don't forget, the origin of communication as a word is not union. People often see communication and they think, oh, it's about union, communion. No. The etymological origin of the word communication is from the Latin munus, which doesn't mean to unite, it means to share. Munus was a sharing, a partition, if you will. What we have here is a basic understanding of communication as sharing. In this case, sharing a relationship, sharing a hallway, sharing a public space, a friendship with somebody. That is all happening before anything is communicated. You see, even at the start of this lecture, I presume that you have English, enough to understand what I'm saying. And in presuming this, in addressing you in English, I am also presuming a foundational relationship, a relationship prior to any particular use of the English language, namely the assumption that we all speak the same. Whether that's a fair assumption or not is another question, but this is exactly where we are here on page 66 of this reading.